Rain fell softly on the quiet hill. Elias stood alone beside a small grave. His head low, the stone in front of him had a name, one he could never forget. Liara, she was not human, but she was everything to him. An alien girl from the stars, with silver hair and eyes that once sparkled like the moon, and now she was gone, buried beneath this soil, far from her own planet, far from home. I came back, Liara, Elias whispered, his voice shaking. He placed a small flower on the grave. Her favorite, the purple earth bloom. I thought I could move on, but I can't, he said. Every night, I still hear your laugh in my dreams. The wind blew gently, like a soft breath against his face. It almost felt like she was there, listening. He sat down beside the grave, the grass damp beneath him. Flashbacks filled his mind, how they met during the Human-Zerathi War. She was a medic from the alien side, captured but kind. Elias was a soldier, injured and bitter. But Liara healed more than just his wounds. She taught him to laugh again, to trust, to love. And when she was taken during a bombing raid, Elias searched for days. They only found her broken communicator and the place where her body was buried. They said you died instantly, Elias said, his fingers tracing the carved letters of her name. But I never believed it. He looked up at the cloudy sky, blinking away the water on his lashes. I didn't get to say goodbye. The graveyard was silent, except for the soft hum of the breeze. Elias closed his eyes, letting the memories wash over him. He stayed like that for hours. Even when the rain turned cold, he didn't move. He was ready to leave, to whisper one last goodbye and walk away forever. But then, a soft sound like a footstep behind him. His heart skipped. Slowly, he turned his head, thinking maybe another mourner had come. But there was no one. Only the trees swaying at the edge of the field. He shook his head, telling himself it was just the wind. He turned back to the grave, whispering, "Goodbye, Liara." And that's when he felt it, a hand, gentle and warm, touched his shoulder. Elias froze, every muscle in his body locked in place. The hand didn't move, just rested there softly. He turned his head slowly, breath stuck in his chest. She was standing there, Liara, wet from the rain, her hair tangled and messy, her skin pale but real, her eyes wide with sadness. She looked scared, confused, tired, but she was alive. Elias scrambled to his feet, staring at her like she was a ghost. "Liara?" he said, barely able to speak the name. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Tears ran down her cheeks, and she nodded. Elias reached out, afraid to touch her in case she vanished. But his hand met hers, warm, shaking, real. "You died," he whispered. "I buried you." She shook her head slowly, her lips trying to form words. But her throat only gave a broken sound. She pointed at the grave, then back at herself, and then at the sky. Elias didn't understand, but he knew one thing: she wasn't dead. She was right here in front of him, breathing, crying, holding his hand. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as the rain poured down harder. "I don't care how," he said. "You're alive. That's all that matters." She clung to him like she had just escaped a nightmare. He could feel her heart beating fast. She was cold, trembling, and silent. But he would protect her again, no matter what. Later that night, they sat in a small shelter near the old battlefield. She wrapped herself in a blanket, eyes still on Elias. She hadn't spoken a word, but she kept drawing strange symbols in the dirt, circles, stars, and shapes he couldn't understand. "Is someone after you?" he asked. She looked away, but her hands didn't stop moving. Something had happened to her, something no human could imagine. And whatever it wasn't over yet. But Elias didn't care. She was back, and he wouldn't lose her again, even if the stars themselves came looking. Elias didn't sleep that night. He sat close to the fire, staring at the girl who should not exist. Liara slept, curled under a thick blanket, her silver hair damp, her skin pale. She didn't speak, but her breathing was soft and steady, as if she had just returned from somewhere far, too far. Grave was still fresh in Elias's memory. He had touched the soil, laid flowers on the stone, said goodbye. So how was she here now? He had touched her, held her, smelled the faint trace of stardust still on her skin. It wasn't a dream, she was real. The fire cracked, and Elias turned his head quickly. His nerves were sharp, alert. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching them. He looked out into the trees beyond the cave entrance. Just shadows, but shadows had secrets, and tonight, Elias didn't trust anything. Liara stirred, letting out a weak sound. He moved beside her and held her hand. It twitched slightly in his grip, like her body remembered him, even if her voice didn't. "I don't know where you came from," he whispered, "but I'm not letting you go again." In the morning, when the light broke through the clouds, Liara woke. Her eyes blinked fast. Confused, afraid, Elias didn't speak. He just smiled, warm and gentle. She stared at him like she was searching for his face in old memories. Then her fingers started moving on the ground. She drew a circle, then a triangle inside it. Then she added what looked like falling stars around it. Elias watched carefully. "What does it mean?" he asked softly. She looked up and pointed at the triangle, then pointed at herself, then at the stars, then at him. Then she placed a hand on her chest and pressed hard, as if showing pain. Elias frowned. "You were taken?" He guessed. She nodded. More symbols, more hand signs. She mimicked something like floating, then falling. Then she grabbed her own head and squeezed her eyes shut. Elias realized she had died, or something close to it. And now somehow she was here again, changed. Later that day, Elias cooked some food using his field kit. Liara refused to eat at first, as if she didn't trust the smell or even her own hunger. But after a while, she took slow bites, her eyes still watching the forest edge, always watching, always alert. Elias finally asked the question he was scared to ask. "Liara, is someone following you?" She froze, her spoon halfway to her lips. Then she slowly lowered it and looked at him. A slow nod, and her hands moved again, quick this time. She drew a long figure with arms like blades, eyes like fire. Then she scratched a deep line across the middle of the figure and drew a symbol over it, a warning. Elias stared. Something followed her back, something dangerous that night. While Liara rested again, Elias stepped outside the cave. He checked the area for signs of tracks, movement, anything unnatural. That's when he saw it. A strange pattern in the dirt, too perfect to be made by wind. A spiral, pressed into the earth like a stamp. Cold ran up his spine. He knew alien tech could do things no human mind could explain. And now, whatever had brought Liara back had left a mark. He rushed back to the cave, his heart racing. She was still there, but now sitting up, eyes wide, breathing fast. She had felt it too. When she saw him, she reached for him quickly and pulled him close. She trembled against him, and when she looked up, her lips moved. This time she tried to speak, even if her voice was cracked and broken. "Eli ... they know." Then she collapsed against him, exhausted. Elias held her tightly. Her return was not a miracle. It was a warning. Whatever pulled her from the grave had not let go, and now it was coming. For them both. The fire had gone out, but the symbol in the dirt still glowed faintly. Elias hadn't slept. He sat beside Liara, watching the strange pattern she had drawn burn gently like hot ash. There was no heat, no smell, just a quiet light that pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. Lyra's head rested on his lap, her skin cold, her breath uneven. She hadn't woken since she whispered those broken words. They know. Who were they? And what did they know? Elias looked around the cave again, searching for answers, but the shadows gave him nothing, only silence. And that low pulsing light in the ground. He felt something was changing, not outside, but inside her. Liara was no longer just a lost alien girl. She was something more now. Something touched by the unknown. A soft sound broke the stillness. Not from the trees, not from the wind, but from Liara. She let out a sharp breath and sat up quickly, her eyes wide. Glowing faint blue, Elias froze. Her eyes had never done that before. "Liara?" he said, reaching out carefully. She blinked fast, and the glow faded. She grabbed his hand and placed it over her heart. He could feel it. Her heartbeat was racing like a drum. She pulled his hand to her temple next, tapping it hard, and then pointed toward the forest beyond the cave. "You sense something?" Elias asked. She nodded, and then quickly scratched at the dirt again. This time, instead of a figure or symbol, she drew a door floating in space, with cracks all around it. Then she drew herself on one side, and Elias on the other. He understood she had crossed through something that wasn't meant to open. They didn't talk for hours. They just packed quietly and left the cave. Elias didn't want to wait for the thing that left those spirals. He didn't trust this planet anymore, not after what he'd seen. They walked toward the southern forest, where an old military outpost had been left abandoned. Elias remembered the place from the war: old bunkers, rusted gates, and leftover scanners still buried under vines. It was the only safe place he could think of. Maybe there he could find tools to understand Lyra's condition, maybe even answers. They traveled all day, stopping only when Lyra collapsed once from pain. Her body was changing. He could see it. Her skin would flicker sometimes. Like static in the air, she would wince, hold her head, and whisper strange words in her own language. And every few hours, the back of her neck would glow with tiny symbols, like alien code. When they reached the outpost, Elias kicked open the old metal hatch. The lights inside flickered weakly, still had backup power. They hid inside, locked the door, and rested. Lyra sat against the wall, breathing hard. Elias searched through the old data terminals. He wasn't a tech expert, but maybe some logs or scanners could help. He found something unexpected: a file labeled Project Rebirth, Case Lyra X. His hand shook as he clicked it. Old camera footage began playing. It showed Lyra in a glass chamber, unconscious, hooked to wires and tubes. Alien scientists stood nearby, not Zirathi, not human, something else. Tall and thin with wide black eyes. They injected her with something, and the footage cut out. Elias stared at the screen, shocked. They didn't just bring her back, they experimented on her, changed her. He looked at Lyra. She was watching him now, silent, tired. He turned the screen toward her. "Do you remember this?" he asked. Her hands trembled, and she nodded slowly. Then she touched the screen where one of the aliens stood, and drew a red X over it with her finger. She feared them, hated them. That night, when Elias slept lightly beside her, he woke suddenly to see Lyra standing near the hatch. She was staring at it like she expected someone to walk in. Her body was glowing again, this time from her spine, where a strange mark had appeared. He stood up quickly. "What is it?" he whispered. She looked at him with glowing eyes and spoke in a low voice. "Not alone." And then the power in the outpost died. The lights blinked out, leaving them in complete darkness. Something had found them, and it was already inside. The darkness was so heavy, it felt alive. Elias stood frozen, barely breathing. The small lights of the outpost had died without warning. No buzz, no flicker, just sudden black. And Lyra's glowing eyes were the only light in the room. She didn't speak again. She simply pointed toward the steel hatch door. There was a sound, not loud, not sharp, but soft, like fingers brushing metal. Elias reached for his pulse gun, one of the old human war models. He hadn't used it in years, but the weight in his hands gave him comfort. He moved slowly to Lyra's side, keeping his eyes on the hatch. "Do you know what it is?" he whispered. She nodded, just once. Then she lifted her hand and drew something in the air, her finger glowing faintly, a circle within a square, then a line cutting it in half. Elias had seen that before in war files labeled Unknown Contact. Red level. Back then, the commander said it was just ghost data, static from old probes. Now he knew it wasn't. It was real, and it had followed her here. The air turned cold. Not normal cold, but wrong. Like something had sucked the warmth from every corner of the bunker. Elias saw his own breath in front of his face. Liara stepped in front of him. Hand stretched out, she began humming low, like a sound deep in her throat, not words vibrations. The humming grew louder, and suddenly a flash of blue light burst from her palm. For a moment, Elias saw it, a shape in the shadows, too tall, too thin. Its limbs bent the wrong way. Its head glowing faint red. Then it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Elias fired his weapon. The blast lit up the room, but hit nothing. Just a wall, cracked from age. Liara pulled him toward the far corridor. They ran through rusted halls and past rooms filled with old tech and shattered glass. Behind them, the sound followed, not footsteps, not breathing, something worse. A scratching noise that came from everywhere at once. They reached the generator room. Liara moved fast, her hands glowing, tracing alien patterns over the main power panel. Elias covered her, gun ready. "What is it?" he asked, yelling over the growing hum. She didn't answer, only pressed her palm to the console. The lights flickered once, twice, then came back on for a moment. The room was full of light again, and standing just outside the doorway, in full view, was the thing that followed her. It didn't look like any known species. Its body shimmered like smoke trapped in glass. Eyes bright with red fire, its mouth, or what looked like one, moved slowly, but no sound came. Liara stared at it, frozen. Then she stepped forward and held up her hand again. "Zivirin," she whispered, her voice finally clear. The creature tilted its head, then took a step forward. Elias raised his gun, but Liara pushed it down. "No," she said. "It doesn't want you." Elias was stunned. "Then what does it want?" She looked at the glowing mark on her arm, then back at the creature. "It wants me back." The creature moved again, slowly, reaching one hand toward her. Liara closed her eyes as if giving in. Elias grabbed her wrist. "No, you're not going back," he said. She looked at him with pain in her eyes. "If I don't, it won't stop." But before she could move, the lights exploded again. Darkness returned, and the creature was gone. In its place was only a mark burned into the wall, same symbol Liara drew earlier. They stood in silence, breathing hard. Then she said in a quiet voice, "I escaped death, Elias, but death didn't forget me." The mountain was older than any human structure. Its rocks whispered in the wind, holding memories from before the war, before Liara died, before she came back. Elias stepped carefully over the cracked path. Each step was slow, his boots pressing into frozen dust. The sun had not risen fully, but the sky was bleeding orange between the cliffs. Behind him, Liara walked silently, wrapped in a long coat. Her eyes no longer glowed, but something in her expression had changed. She was remembering more. Elias could feel it, and she didn't like what she remembered. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't cold, it was heavy, full of questions they were both afraid to ask. They were climbing toward a place Liara said only one word about: origin. Elias had seen the coordinates buried in the outpost terminal, a hidden location far in the northern ridge, a forgotten research lab buried in the bones of the mountain. Old war maps listed it as a mining base, but Liara said it was more. It was where she had been reborn. By the time they reached the entrance, the wind had vanished, the metal doors were rusted shut, but strange black lines covered them like veins. Liara placed her palm on the door. A soft hum began, deep and distant. The veins lit up with pale blue light, and the doors opened. No sound, just air that smelled like ash and memory. They stepped inside. The walls were smooth, not human-made, not even Zirithi, something older. The lights inside turned on by themselves, glowing with soft violet color. Elias stayed close to Liara, gun ready. She moved like she had been here before. They passed through rooms filled with strange equipment, tubes, tanks, broken chairs. Some held clothes that looked too small for humans, too sharp for comfort. And then they entered a chamber, cold and silent. At the center stood a stasis pod, still sealed, still glowing. Inside floated something Elias couldn't believe. It was her, Liara, again, hair floating like silver seaweed. Eyes closed, body still, exactly like the girl beside him. Elias stepped back, confused. He looked at the Liara who had walked with him this whole time. She didn't look surprised. She only looked sad. She is the original, Liara said softly. Her voice echoed in the cold room. Elias stared at the sleeping girl. Then who are you? He asked. The Liara beside him touched her own chest. I'm the copy, she said. The memory. The failed twin. The truth cracked through Elias's heart like thunder. The girl he had buried might still be inside this pod, untouched, unchanged, asleep all these years. And the one he saved, the one who touched his shoulder at the grave, was a shadow with feelings, a shadow who bled and cried, and remembered him. He didn't know what to say, but Liara, the one beside him, did. They made me to test if the soul could return, she said. I wasn't supposed to survive, but I did, because you called me back. Suddenly, the walls vibrated with a soft tone. Elias raised his gun. The floor began to glow, a symbol forming beneath the pod, the same symbol from the bunker, from the spiral in the dirt. Liara's eyes widened. They found us again. The lights above flickered, and the chamber grew colder. Then the pod hissed. Steam burst out as the locks released. The original Liara slowly opened her eyes, and for one long second, both girls looked at each other. Same face, same eyes, same soul split between two bodies. And then the mountain groaned, not from nature, but from something ancient waking up. Beneath them, the mountain didn't shake, it breathed. The air inside the chamber pulsed, rising and falling like a slow heartbeat. Elias stepped back, gun raised. As the two Liaras stared at each other in silence, one stood on the cold floor, trembling but alive. The other floated inside the stasis pod, her body newly awakened, eyes wide, blinking softly. Neither of them moved. But something beneath the surface of the lab did. From the walls came a faint clicking sound, not mechanical, not natural, but alive. The copy Liara turned to Elias and whispered, "It knows the door is open now." "What door?" Elias asked, still pointing his weapon between the two girls. She pointed to the pod. "She is the key." The real Liara, if that's what she was, placed her hand on the inside glass of the chamber. And then the chamber opened, steam rolled out like fog over ice. The girl inside stepped out slowly, her legs shaky. She looked at Elias with eyes that didn't yet know fear. But she said nothing. She looked at the other Liara, then reached toward her gently. Their fingers touched, and the air cracked. A flash of white light burst through the ceiling above them. Elias fell back, covering his face. The room screamed, like metal tearing under pressure. And when he opened his eyes, the two Liaras were on the floor, both unconscious. The sound stopped, but a new one began. Footsteps, not from a hallway, but from the walls themselves. They slid open like skin revealing bone. Figures stepped through, tall, thin, covered in glass-like armor, no faces, only smooth mirrored masks. They didn't walk like soldiers. They drifted. One pointed at the Liaras. Another looked at Elias, but didn't raise a weapon. It tilted its head, curious. Then it spoke, not with words, but directly into his mind. "The test is complete." Elias stood, breathing hard. "What test?" The voice replied, cold and clear. "Separation of memory and soul, host replication, emotional tethering, human resistance to grief." Elias's jaw clenched. "You used her." "You used me. Necessary," the voice said. The tallest one stepped forward and reached for both girls. "No," Elias growled, stepping in front of them. The creature paused. "You have formed attachment," it said. "Expected. Take one, not both," it continued. Elias shook his head. "They're both real," he said. "They both feel. They both remember. They both matter." A second figure stepped forward, its mask flickering with strange lights. "Only one soul may remain," it replied. "Merge or erase." Liara, the one who touched Elias at the grave, opened her eyes weakly. She heard the words, and tears filled her eyes. Elias looked down at her. "Don't listen to them," he whispered. "You're real to me, but the original." Liara was awake now too. She stood, walked to the center of the room, and said something so quiet it didn't need volume to break Elias's heart. "Then let it be me," Elias shouted. "No." But she smiled. "I am whole," she said. "She is the piece of me that felt." The lights above dimmed, and the ground opened beneath the platform. A merging pod rose from the floor. The aliens waited. Both Liaras looked at each other, then at Elias. He could see it in their eyes. They didn't want to die, but they didn't want to erase the other either. So they stepped into the pod together. As the glass closed, Elias slammed his hand against it. "Come back to me," he whispered. "Come back as you." The machine powered on. Light poured out in every direction, and the mountain finally went still. The world was quiet, not just silent but empty. Elias stood alone in the chamber. The pod was dark now. No light, no sound, no movement. It had closed like a tomb, and now it sat still like a forgotten coffin. The strange glass-armored creatures had vanished, gone the moment the merging began. No explosions, no warnings. They had simply faded like a dream ending. Elias placed a hand on the side of the pod. His fingers trembled. He didn't know who or what would come out. The Liara he first met during war. The Liara who returned from the grave. Or someone new, with pieces of both and memories he might not recognize. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. Time felt strange inside the mountain. Then, without warning, the pod hissed. Steam poured out. The glass opened slowly, and she stepped out, barefoot, eyes closed, arms hanging by her sides. Elias didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared, waiting for her to say anything. She took a breath, then opened her eyes. They were different. Now not blue, not silver, but a soft gold glow, like candlelight reflected in water. "Elias," she whispered. He almost collapsed when he heard her say his name. Not because of the voice, but because of how she said it, like she remembered everything. He stepped forward, gently touching her face. "Which one are you?" he asked. She leaned into his palm, smiled, and said, "I don't know, but I feel like me." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, not asking more, not needing more. Whoever she was, this was Liara, the one who reached out from the grave, the one who returned from memory, the one who fought not just to live but to be. They left the chamber slowly. The mountain no longer pulsed. It had returned to sleep, and the stars above were clear and still. Back at their small outpost, Elias sat beside her by the fire. She stared into the flames like she had seen the end of the universe and returned with a secret. He didn't press her. He just gave her space, warmth, and time. Later that night, as he drifted to sleep beside her, she whispered, "I saw them." Elias opened one eye. "Who?" "The ones beyond death," she said softly. "They aren't gods. They're just curious. They wanted to know if love survives the grave." Elias looked at her. "And does it?" he asked. She reached out and touched his shoulder, just like she did the day she returned. "Yes," she said. "Love was the only thing strong enough to pull me back." He smiled, eyes heavy with sleep. "You came back to me," he murmured. She kissed his forehead. "I never really left," she whispered, "and somewhere far, far beyond the stars." A machine blinked, recorded the final result, and powered down forever.